changed since we were here last year at this time. When we were at NYAIL's Legislative Day last year, the health budget was completely up in the air to be determined by the Medicaid redesign team. So we were kind of going into our meetings not sure exactly what to say. Since that time, the Medicaid redesign team has proposed and begun to implement over 200 proposals that will completely transform the system and save the state up to $3 billion. They are completely transforming the system and changing the way that people with disabilities are accessing their services and supports that they need to maintain their independence in the community. You've all undoubtedly seen this impact and the changes that they have had. We heard from Susan and Kevin as well a little bit about the challenges we've overcome to date, including some of the positive proposals in this year's budget, but also some of the challenges that we still face. So now, as the state is continuing to implement these many system changes, they are also looking at how to capture the savings realized from these initiatives and looking at where to reinvest them back into the system to further reduce spending and also to serve people effectively. Melanie touched on this a little bit in her opening, but I'm here to really urge you to focus time in your meetings on urging your legislators to have the state reinvest some of these savings back into ILC services and housing. ILC services and accessible, affordable, integrated housing are essential to people with disabilities as the system changes, as they begin to implement mandatory managed care and managed long-term care, as well as while they simultaneously begin homestead planning. As you all know, the essential services that ILCs provide, the supports and advocacy to ensure that all people with disabilities have access to services and supports to live in the community are needed now more than ever because of all these changes that are occurring in the system and directly impacting this population. We also heard from Roger Bearden from CQC about the state's plans for developing an Olmstead implementation plan, and ILCs are ideally placed to assist the state with the effort by helping individuals with disabilities access the services and supports they need to live fully integrated in the community. We must also note that all the work done by ILCs is done on a peer model, people with disabilities assisting people with disabilities, because many of the MRT groups and the MRT as a whole has identified peer supports as a potential priority for reinvesting the savings back into the system. Melanie also noted that data from State Ed Access VR shows that the work of ILC is transitioning and diverting people with disabilities from institutions to integrated settings has saved the state over $1 billion since 2001. And we're the only organizations in the community that are doing this work. So in fact, investing in ILCs will save the state additional dollars. So in your meetings today, be sure to make the case to your legislators that the state needs to invest in ILCs. And then housing as well must also be a focus. We as disability advocates have identified housing as a major barrier to people with disabilities living in the community for years. And now we must assure that affordable, accessible, integrated housing is what drives the development of a state disability housing policy. The state has specifically identified housing for these reinvestment funds, and in fact, the executive budget sets this up by allowing savings received from closing or decertifying nursing home and hospital beds to be reinvested into housing. We must make sure that it is into affordable, accessible, integrated housing, which is not directly connected to service provision, but allows individuals to live integrated in the community and receive the community-based services and supports that they choose. In the State of the State address, as I think Melanie or Roger noted, Governor Cuomo, along with making a commitment to developing an Olmstead implementation plan, specifically noted the need that this includes access to affordable and accessible housing. So NYAIL has developed specific principles that the state should use when they are developing the housing. First being that we must ensure all individuals are given full and accurate information about the options, including what services and financial supports are available to them in the community. All individuals must have access to housing that's integrated in the community with control of a lease or ownership. and they have to be assured full independence, so deciding where to live, with whom, when and what to eat. And thirdly, that housing for people with disabilities should not be conditioned on compliance with treatment or service plan. So we actually developed specific recommendations that we would like to see the money that is being reinvested into housing used for. The first would be creating a broader housing subsidy for people with disabilities who are institutionalized or at risk of unnecessary institutionalization because of the lack of housing. We all know all too well that the federal Section 8 housing subsidy program is extremely limited. In most communities, the list is years long or closed completely. And the housing subsidies that are attached to the nursing facility transition diversion waiver and the traumatic brain injury Medicaid waiver, while very successful, are limited to that specific population that is eligible for and successfully enrolled into that waiver. So we'd like to see a broader housing subsidy that ensures people with disabilities and older New Yorkers who need long-term services don't end up in nursing facilities solely due to the lack of housing. We also recommend increasing funding for the Access to Home Modification Program. I know you all know about this program. I've had actually several people come up to me already this morning because they've heard that funding is being cut, or they've noticed less access to the program in their community. And we also reference the Restore program, which pays for the cost of emergency home repairs. Both of these programs provide a vital service that ensures individuals can maintain independence in the community, but they are deeply underfunded and access is severely limited. So we would like to see savings go into these programs, substantial savings go into these programs to increase the funding. And our third recommendation is that the state fund and the development of more housing units that are truly affordable to people with disabilities living on extremely low and fixed incomes. So when you meet with your legislators today, urge them that the state invest in the essential ILC services, as well as stress the need for affordable, accessible, integrated housing. Be sure that you define what that means. Direct them to your legislative packet for more information, including specific recommendations for Medicaid reinvestment. And that's it.